So we are ready to continue now with our last presentation. I would like to introduce Dr. Lea Kreinin. Lea recently defended her PhD about Estonians in Scotland at the University of Glasgow. And since 2017, he has headed education and training activities at the Estonian Institute in Tallinn. And in addition to that, she also manages a project Culture Step, which aims to support the immigrants' networking and adaptation in Estonia as a host country. Lea is also very active in various fields connected with Estonian Western diaspora. She writes articles in several newspapers. She reads lectures and organizes cultural events. So she is always very busy. But today she is here as an individual with a long immigrant experience, and she will speak about the gains and losses which can accompany with living abroad.
Thank you very much. First, when I got this, invitation to come here, I felt like, in Denmark in 2000 they started a human library, and there is a project which makes society more tolerant and more inclusive, and therefore you can borrow human books who tell their story. So I feel like I'm this human book, and I'm also very happy if you ask questions later, but it's weird to talk about my personal experience, because in the field of migration I've been to all sides. I've been to at the side of the researcher while doing my PhD, and also I've been experiencing migration myself. Although I still think that I'm kind of typical migrant. If you think of labor migrants, you kind of, if you have seen a new Estonian film, Take It or Leave It. No, it was nominated to Oscars this year, but it's interesting because it shows you that kind of prototypical, what do you think, labor migration. There is somewhere in suburb, in a very ugly house, there is a room where 4 people sleep together, and they take shifts or they work in some building site, and then they are very depressed and they all do it for money, and then they come back home for a while and they don't really take part at the society, the receiving country's society at all. They are just there for earn money and support their families. I've been away from Estonia 17 years in 3 different countries, and I came back last year. Now I work at the Estonian Institute, and everything is very well. But when I went away, I don't really know. I think 17 years is a long enough time to understand that what are the real values and what you really want. And since I've been back, I feel that that's a place I want to be, in Estonia. But it was very, very interesting period. And when I was thinking of this topic, gains and losses, I was thinking that actually at the personal level as well as at the state level, you could think of migration as a gain-gain situation. For example, it gives jobs to persons from deprived areas where are no jobs available. It helps to boost the economy of the receiving country as well as a sending country, because migrants send remittances back home and they boost sending society in all levels, like a state level, also in a personal level. And it can be like a gain-gain situation. And why does it still feel like I'm losing so much, or I have lost so much? Or not me personally, I've only gained. But people feel like they are losing things, and what do they actually lose then? I think it is first. I really liked Juhan's presentation because he also marked down things what actually people lose. They were refugees, but migrants are also very similar to a certain extent, because we could also discuss about, is the voluntary migration always voluntary? because people have been pushed away to foreign countries because they can't have jobs here, or they have other reasons which really don't leave them many choices sometimes. And first loss is losing your comfort zone, losing the cultural environment you have been part of. And in the beginning, even people who are adapting very well, and I have been very lucky because I've been living in countries like Hungary, UK, Scotland, more precisely, and Canada, and I spoke their language when I went there. But even me, I felt like, in the beginning it's very interesting, and you're absorbing everything, and you go around, and it's so interesting to go to a supermarket and you don't find anything, you don't know where things are, and then suddenly it kind of hits you. And it's very, very painful. I need yeast, but I don't know even how yeast is called in English. So, and I don't know where it is, and is it a powder, or is it like, in Estonia, which means like a little packet of something, and you can't find anything. And especially difficult it is if you don't speak a language. Or even if you speak English and you manage quite well at the university. When I was teaching that time, Glasgow University, which was very competitive university where everybody except our secretary were actually from England, and they spoke very nice Oxbridge or whatever they call it. And then you go and you want to order a plumber or electrician, and you can't understand what they talk to you because they talk in broad Glaswegian. And a taxi driver, one of my first very funny experiences, I'd been there like a week, and we ordered a taxi to go to the airport very early in the morning. And there was a little card left by people who rented this flat to me where I lived. And they said, that's a taxi number. It said private hire. So, okay, I phoned the number. I said, please, I would like to have a taxi, 6 o'clock in the morning. 6 o'clock in the morning, I look out of the window, there is a car. Like some usual, I don't know, Mazda or whatever it was, standing in front of my house. It wasn't a black cab. I was waiting for a taxi, And I refused to go out, and my children said, yeah, Mom, I think it is a taxi. No, it isn't a taxi. I went there, I knocked on the door. The guy opened the door. I said, good morning, excuse me, are you a taxi? And then he said to me, I didn't understand. And said, excuse me, I don't understand you, can you please repeat? In Glaswegian, like, something I don't understand. And then my children burst into laughing. And then finally I understood. He said, no, I'm a yellow submarine. Thank you very much for your Scottish humor, but it's too early for me. I haven't had my coffee yet, so can we go to the airport, please? And I made a mistake. So in UK, tabloids, there is a ever going on topic about Eastern European migrants come to the country and live on benefits. They sponged money out of us, we are hardworking, and then these migrants come and live on benefits. And what I did, I had to apply for a child tax credit because I had 2 children. They were underage, but I didn't know what was the difference between child tax credit and child benefit. So I filled in totally wrong forms, and I went to the city council and I submitted them. And these people were so horrified by seeing me, like an Eastern European migrant coming here, sponging on our money. And then I was told that, sorry, you should have, somebody understood that I had just filled in wrong forms. But it's so difficult. Or how to find a doctor. I Googled family doctor, nothing. It's GP. It's a general practitioner, it's called. So little things which really annoy you sometimes, and you get so tired and you miss your home country where everything was so smooth and you knew where to go and what to do. Or even, I managed very well at the university. I have lectures and classes and seminars in English, but then I'm afraid of going to yoga classes because I feel that it's out of my comfort zone. I don't know what people wear there. And if I understand everything in, the terms and things you have to do there, is my English good enough for yoga classes? It's weird now to think back. But all these little problems, and you are out of your comfort zone, and it makes your life a bit more difficult and complicated, which is interesting at the same time, of course. Then contacts with family and friends. It is like nowadays we have Skype and email and all kind of means to keep in touch, and also cheap flights which unite people and connect them. But sometimes it's still, you feel, if you see somebody on a screen, it's not the same. You can't have a glass of wine with them, and you can't hug them, and you miss them very much. And when I did my PhD and I interviewed more than 50 people for that, and also one question I asked was homesickness. And some people were very homesick and some people weren't. And one person said that she becomes homesick every time she's in contact with her family via Skype. And she, especially when it's summer and they are chilling and grilling outside and it's pouring rain in Glasgow, she feels so homesick. So it is also different and difficult. And what do people do to tackle homesickness? I think that most of the major thing I missed in when I was living abroad was Estonian bread. It sounds very trivial, but it is really the major thing. And I started to bake bread. Me, who hates baking, I don't like cooking at all. I'm very crappy in kind of baking and stuff like this. I started to bake my own bread because I missed it so much. It gives you new skills. Look, migration is very good for you. And also, I know a lot of people have experienced hostile, like a receiving society has been hostile towards them, have experienced hostility and maybe, if not physical threats, then at least negative attitudes. And like, you feel like somebody's looking at you weirdly, or they are not very friendly towards you. And when I was interviewing my recipients for a PhD, then a lot of them experienced hostility and even physical threats, like somebody threw the stone. My daughter, who still lives in UK, they moved into a new flat in a not very good area, and there was another person in this house who was Polish, and then their windows were broken twice. Somebody threw stones into their windows, which is not a coincidence. So these things make you feel uneasy, and it's not a good feeling at all. And also, of course, there is a labor market discrimination. As good as you can be in your field of study, or whatever you know, or whatever you can do, you're always second range. They always prefer someone who is one of their own. Even it is a discrimination and they don't want you to know it, but it's still there. People who have applied for jobs. I know people who live in UK and they have even changed their name to Smith or something like this to get the job. And then suddenly they changed the name and they got offers for interviews. But until they turned up, of course, then they realized, oh, you are a migrant. No, we don't want you. And that makes living abroad quite difficult and unpleasant. I never experienced hardship abroad, but when first I was in UK, I was in Glasgow, at Glasgow University as a lecturer. It was a bilateral agreement with Estonian state, so I got my salary from Estonia actually, and it was for 5 years. And then the principal of the university, there was a new principal who was businessman who said no languages, closed down all language departments and also social anthropology and other departments which didn't make money and only focused on business and management and things which make a lot of money. So I decided to stay there and do my PhD there, and my department was very supportive and also but my salary, living on some kind of project money and very temporary works, it is not good on long term. And it gave me an opportunity to test myself as a childminder, for example. Even getting a job there, nobody recruits you because you are overeducated for them. If you want to do some primitive jobs, because you have to do something to earn some money, then they won't take you seriously. They say, no, we don't want you. We want somebody who is not so educated, and so on. But it was interesting. And what I could say at the end, when I had a very, very hard time sometimes, then I was always thinking, listen, Lea, this is your free language course. People pay a lot of money to learn a foreign language. I am here. I can learn language. I can learn the culture. I can have experience. And it's so interesting to be here. And they even pay me. I have a salary. And it's like a paid holiday pretty much abroad or a free language course. And that's a way of thinking which really helps, I think. And also it gave me a possibility to widen my horizon, learn new skills, like bread baking, for example, or something else. And also I'm very thankful to all these 17 years I was abroad, because I feel that it has been very useful for my current job. I do at the Estonian Institute. From one hand, I'm dealing with Estonian schools abroad. And as I have been one of those people who do this job abroad, when I was in Canada, I taught in the Estonian school in Toronto for a year. It has given me invaluable insight of this life, of every fields of being abroad, living and working abroad. And also the other thing I'm doing now is we have a integration foundation. We won a tender which is about cultural integration of new immigrants, and we call it Culture Step. And it's parallelly, I'm the one who runs the English language part of it, those people who are mostly new immigrants, mostly English speaking, and my colleague does it for Russian speaking, the non-integrated permanent inhabitants, which are, like leftovers from Soviet occupation, people who were like people who have stayed here after Soviet occupation, and they haven't integrated into society, and they don't speak language, and they feel not at home here. And it has been a really interesting thing for me, because when I was living abroad, I still remember what I was interested in and what were these things I wanted to know about. And now we have been with my English language bunch of people who first group actually graduated just because I couldn't come here on the first day at the conference, because we had a graduation party in Tallinn, and 30 hours of lectures and field trips and all kinds of interesting things. We've been to bread factory, labor, seeing how Estonian bread is made, and at a lot of museums. Also, we had a trip to Lahemaa National Park and Tartu Estonian National Museum, and we've done so many interesting things with them, and I really feel like I brought Estonia and Estonian culture and Estonian people closer to these people who live here. But also there have been negative moments. For example, has been like 40% of dropout from the program, and I've written them emails and asked them, why do you want to go on, or do you want to quit, and why do you want to quit? Then I got some emails from people who have been bullied and discriminated on racial basis in Estonia, And one of them just wrote me that I have lost all interest towards this society. I don't want to know anything about Estonia. I'm not interested. I'm just here for money. And that's me, and please leave me alone with your program. So it is very sad. But I don't know, I don't want to talk anymore, so maybe you have some questions, and also other people who presented. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Lea. Thank you for this amazing presentation. Now I ask you, Lea, also Susanne and Juhan, to take your seats around the table for discussion. I give the microphone to our Nordplus fellow, Professor Baiba Bela from the University of Latvia, to moderate the discussion. Thank you.
I worry a little bit because it's have been 2 long days, but presentations and stories this morning was so interesting, and I think that we really had a look through those days from the migration issues from all possible perspectives, from sending country and receiving country, from going abroad and receiving those who are coming to our country. And this perspective of this human experience, I think, is very, very important. And as we had no room for questions after the talks, so I was asked to actually moderate the question session. So indeed, I would like to give a floor to you for your questions, because you had no opportunity to ask those right after. Did you write down some questions? Yeah.
Lea, continue with her. I stayed abroad also myself for 11 years, and I came back many years ago now already. And I know what are my reasons, but actually, what were your final reasons to come back? And more generally, what would you advise to all these young people and middle-aged people staying abroad that are asked to come back? What are the practical good reasons to come back here to Estonia? Are there any? Like, what would you say?
It is a difficult question because, as some of you may know, there was this big campaign in Estonia for a couple of years ago, Talents Home. Talents Back Home. The president was leading it, and it wasn't a successful campaign at all. And some people who tried to come back that time, they experienced, nobody was waiting for them here. They felt like they're not welcome. But now I'm back, and every time I tell my friends that, I'm back in Estonia, young talents back home or something. But for me personally, I felt like my time was over in foreign countries. I'd been living 17 years in 3 different countries. I finally wrote my PhD, and since that time I was always thinking that once I grow up, what all things I will do in my life. And once I done my PhD, it felt like now I'm grown up. Now I should go back to Estonia and do something useful. And here I am. But what I would give as an advice for people to come back, people told me before I came back, they said, no, don't go back. You will never get used to Estonia anymore. You got used to living abroad in a very multicultural, multinational societies, and then you go back to Estonia and you will never get used to it anymore. And I was really afraid of it, so I was afraid of coming back. And first it was like euphoric state. I go to shops and all these nice Estonian foodstuffs I can eat again. And my friends are all here, and I understand everybody, and it felt so easy to come back after 17 years. It felt so easy. And then I was thinking, when will the reality hit? When will be the moment when I feel like, I made a mistake? It has still not come. So I've been here 14 months now, and it hasn't come yet, so I hope it will never come. Thank you.
I just wanted to kind of have a tiny personal comment, but then to go on with other issues. But I lived abroad for the longest. I lived for 2 years in the US, and I did my MA there. And when I think back of it, one of the worst years in my life was when I came back to Estonia with a recently earned MA degree that I really worked hard to get, teaching also Estonian there. And we came back. We were so poor with my husband that our parents had to give us money for food, and I taught at the university. I made no money at all there, and I felt, and then the university said that we don't know if we're going to actually accept this degree from Indiana University. It was in the mid-90s, and I felt so unwelcome and unnecessary, and I had somehow, my friends were more distant from me. So that was basically the hardest year in kind of general sense in my life. It wasn't really easy. It's not. I didn't want to decide that, okay, I'm going to leave again, but it was just difficult. But I wanted to go on with different kind of questions that would be more to all of you. Well, one thing that I was thinking when I was listening to Juhan and Lea, also concerning refugees who come to Estonia, was that it's like, what would be the best thing to do to kind of to get to those people who, as Lea says, they drop out of the course. For example, they say they have this negative experience. I don't want to do anything with this country's culture anymore. Or like, as you said, that they never get to kind of any connections with culture or people, and kind of shut themselves off and just leave. So what could be done to help that? And then, since Susanne's presentation focused on municipal level in a way, that my question that what kind of levels of, how to say, like state administration should be, in your opinion, involved and to help the situation, and how, or if it is kind of up to also, for example, NGO activity, or also this kind of, how to say, this grassroots or volunteer, this kind of activity, or where there could be some solutions, at least hypothetically.
Start.
Yes, thanks for the question. I think, and today we also discussed here that the personal level is very important. If this resettlement program, it was technically, it was done, I would say, quite smoothly and well, but with the state and municipalities and the IOM in Greece. But what is lacking is that the local communities, they didn't know anything who is coming. They in Haapsalu, Põlva, Tartu, everywhere. So then suddenly the families arrived, but there wasn't any kind of warming up done, and there wasn't any local organizations really were not informed. So, for example, I just had we in our organization we have a supervisor who is from Finland, Pia Ruotsala. Well, she said that in just an example that in Finland it's always the local grassroots organizations, including church, they know that who is coming, and they think who could maybe be this. The kind of hosting organization way. So we lack, especially in the smaller towns, we lack also these kind of sometimes this facilitated or level of reception from the personal the people and persons. So I think this is something that we should surely think that it's not only about administration and kind of technical operation. So it really kind of felt like operation and not to relocate or to resettle persons from point A to point B, but really there was a lack of this kind of personal connections with these municipalities.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also advice to all Estonians, please smile. Please look friendly. Estonians are not unfriendly, but they don't know how to, show their friendliness. And if you come from abroad, everybody says that Estonians are so angry looking and like they hated you or something. They don't actually. They're just very introverts and they don't know how to smile and it's. But yeah, I agree with you. And what I was thinking also, if people knew who you were and you had a personal contact with these people who had come here, it would be much easier for both. I mean, for comers and those who are here. And to introduce themselves, one of my interviewees when I did my PhD, she was as a child. They were after German DB camps. Her father got a job in Scotland, in the middle of nowhere, in Scottish Islands. We're a little village, and there was a village shop 100 meters from the little cottage they lived, and another family lived 200 meters away. And when they arrived there, the family, the neighboring family came to greet them, and they had a basket full of all kind of goodness they had never seen in Germany, like home-baked cakes and honey and all kind of nice things, just to say you are welcome and come here and live here and let's be friends. That's so important in the beginning. If you feel welcome by the society, the receiving society, it's much easier to adapt.
How it is about Oslo, yeah. And in that way, it's the same. Returned migrants are saying that all these gloomy faces all around, we can't stand it.
And the same goes for Norway. I thought maybe I should say a few words about asylum seekers and refugees, since that is what you are talking about. And we have had refugees for many years. We have asylum centers all over the country. They are run by the municipality or mostly by private businesses. But they are very eager to work in ways that integrate the asylum seekers with the local community while they are in the center. And in Norway, some live in centers, in old school buildings or whatever, but most live in ordinary flats around in the neighborhoods, which is a way to integrate them with the community, and which is good in many ways, but in other ways it can be more isolated if you don't have these bridge builders. But in the good asylum centers, they work very hard together with or to include the local organizations so that the asylum seekers get to know people and get to become a part of the community. And what we see when they get permission to stay, in Norway the normal rule is that they are assigned to a municipality. They don't decide for themselves, but there is an exception if you find a municipality and a home by yourself. And then quite a few ask to be settled in the same municipality as they lived in asylum center, because they have started to get networks. They know the people, the children are in the kindergartens, etc. So even though you ask about this level, it's the state runs the asylum centers, the municipality have to deliver services, but they are really dependent on the local communities and the organizations to get people involved and get the friends, etc. And another thing with Norway, different from you, is that we had all the time had the policy that you should settle refugees. They are settled all over the countries, but that you should form some small ethnic groups. So if you place Somalis in in northern Norway, there should be some other Somalis there, so that they can have a community. Not too big, but a community. And also I thought about, someone here yesterday talked about how can you live in the north, without light. And for refugees coming to Norway who are placed in the north, if in the winter, if they are not told about this climate and the dark, they don't understand. They think they are placed on the moon or something. It's very difficult. So if they don't get this information, and that's often that the municipality does not have information about the refugees coming because it goes so quick.
All your questions are answered now, or someone is forgotten? So next question, and then yours question, and then.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting talks you had. It's maybe just a little comment or thought. I was really intrigued, or I liked very much the idea that Susanne underlined with the shift from rights to duties also. So basically the understanding that every member in a society has also to put something in, or is part and an active part. And I was wondering, and maybe Juhan also touched upon it right now in the first answer in somehow. I was wondering whether here in Estonia, do the people, or whether is the question also that here the people do not always feel, also Estonians or the people from here, they don't themselves often feel that they also have duties, or they kind of need to not only demand the rights, but also be like active community members. And this is, the shift is taking place, but it will take some time. And maybe this is also, I don't know, it's not really a question, but it was something what I was thinking when I was listening to you.
Can I? Sure. We have also in Estonia some really positive examples. For example, maybe you know that it's in Risti Vald, or yes, in Harjumaa, there were exactly the opposite example, that the local community, quite Christian community, they personally approached the social minister and said that send some families to us. So they had the house ready and in a very welcoming manner, and they had also, they thought what work they could do and so on. So they and it was a very active community. So I think when we look at Estonian local communities, sometimes they are quite active in the local field. So the question is that how we could include now the family into this community. Do we have some leaders in this community who could be the bridge builders within these families? So I think it is existent. It is there. The field, the sense of being a part of a community, but it just takes time and examples and good examples, and also these families that they should stay. If they leave, for example, this Põlva case, it wasn't the only case. All the 4 families, they left Põlva because the same apartment got empty, and then they put the other families there, and everyone left. So the community level was lacking there.
I would like to add also that it is like a two-way process. It's not only that they come here, they have to learn our ways of living and our culture and whatever we offer them, but also we should make an attempt to learn theirs, their life experience, their culture. They even why not having a Syrian cooking class? I would love to go there, so they could contribute towards local community. and they could give us something which makes it more valuable, and they would feel much better after that.
And I wonder, how about community level in metropolis area, because it's completely different kind of community in city space than in small country places.
Yeah, I would have one comment on this from Oslo and one from the countryside. Most of the neighborhoods where immigrants live in Oslo are organized as housing cooperatives, which means that you are an owner, but it also means that you have a duty together with the others to run the area and the neighborhood. And in these corporations, every spring, every autumn, there is voluntary work, and it's expected that you take part. You do the gardens, you do things for the children, etc., etc. It has been difficult to motivate the immigrants to take part. It's very easy to get the children. In the beginning, the Norwegian people, they said, oh, it's so difficult with all these children, what shall we do with them? But then they changed and said, this is a new generation of people who is going to live here. So they included all the children, which also helped to mobilize the parents. So now it's in a way a slowly change going on in the city of Oslo in this way. And it's the same about all the sport organizations, etc., which rely on voluntary participation from the parents. It's now a change, which is quite important. If we go to the countryside, we have been doing studies there. People, immigrants, we ask them, are you included? And in what ways? And they are included in the labor market. They are expected to take part in local organizations. Some do. And the reason for this is that small places in the countryside in Norway is quite small and experiencing depopulation, but then with the immigration, it's balanced. So if these small places shall survive as communities, all people have to take part. If not, they will die. And then we ask people, are you included? In the way, are you invited into people's home? Do you drink a glass of wine, etc., and bubble? And very seldom. But then they said that in this community, in one community, the entry of ticket was to take part in the local organizations and be active and follow up your children in these organizations. In two other municipalities, the entry ticket was to take part in leisure activities in the nature in the same way as the Norwegians, because then you get on the inside. And that's a way to participate, and it's also a way, as you said, that you can learn the Norwegian about your things, which they, of course, value. But it's important also to add that the story is much of the same for Norwegian in-movers. So when we have presentations in these municipalities for the politicians, etc., in the end, have you asked the Norwegians, the Norwegian in-movers? And they say, the story is very much the same for me. I don't have friends, I just have activity friends.
And here is Laura, and then Mara, yours. Laura was first, sorry.
Sorry for that. Thank you for Lea's presentation and the other speakers. Unfortunately, I wasn't here to hear you, but anyhow, now I get the point how you all three connect. My entry point to this is I think really appreciate the way Lea was giving her own experiences, this sort of auto-ethnography almost of living abroad, because that sort of helps to emphasize the fact that the more we emphasize the differences between our experiences and us, as transnationals or cosmopolitans or researchers or whatever, or national citizens, and those who come, the incomers, the more trouble there is. So with I feel that all ways that we can devise which sort of diminish this difference between who we are and how we experience these things would make a big difference. So it's very much, I agree that it's very much about the personal level, these encounters on the different levels with different people, and also this reciprocal relations on the local level, because our everyday lives, they happen locally after all. So it's all about sort of this being making ways for newcomers to not only to adapt, but also for us to learn from them. And I think we could introduce the term of curiosity, like welcoming attitude. I don't think it's enough in itself, because then it's like, yeah, okay, you are okay to come here, but you sort of have to adapt to how it is, as if our cultures and communities weren't changing all the time as well. So this idea that we'd be curious to learn from each other and therefore, for example, in these ways that you mentioned here. But my question, so I really appreciate this coming together of you three for the panel. I have a question regarding some of the problematic sides. For example, Lea mentioned and you mentioned, and yesterday we heard from Sari about racism and exclusion, discrimination, and how it can affect people, and how disturbing and destructive it can be. So could you sort of elaborate on if you can think of some sort of social level or practical level best practices, sort of, or inventions, social inventions to educate and against racism and this sort of attitude. And then secondarily, I wanted to ask Susanne about, as we know from Norway, also and from Finland, that when people are first settled in municipalities, it's very much the same as you described for Norway. But then they tend to all go away eventually from the rural localities, from smaller towns. There's a period like 2 years or something that you are supposed to stay, but then, of course, people, when they've got residence permits and the right to stay, they are free to choose where they live, and that's a basic human right. And in Sari's case yesterday, we heard about Fatima, who would have liked to stay in the small locality, but needed to go to the Helsinki area for a job. To support herself. So how is it in this fact in Estonia versus in Norway? Thank you.
Yeah, this last question about staying on in the rural areas or not is quite interesting, and we just have finished a Nordic project about this, Sweden, Norway and Denmark. And what is important is that not the integration policy, but the regional policy is very different in these countries. Norway has, since the Second World War, had a policy of saying that there should be people living all over Norway. It's part of the defense policy. And this means that to have people all over, you also need economy all over. People have to live from something. So this means that the economy in the Norwegian regions are quite different from in Sweden, for example. So when refugees are now, first the labor migrants, most of them live outside the cities because there are jobs around. And when it comes to the refugees, they are settled all over. In the beginning, most people would like to be in Oslo or in other big cities. But what we see now is that they are not moving to Oslo when they are free to move. And now about 80% still live in these small places 5 years after they are settled there. They can move freely after 2 years. So they live in this municipality or in the region where they can find job. Only 20% of those 20% who move further go to Oslo. So this is really a change. And we have like small we have the fishing industry on the coast, which is expanding, and like a very small municipality, which I had some project there. They said that now even Somalis are coming to our municipality from other places to work in the fishing. So this is really a different situation from Sweden and, for example, Denmark. And and also the tourism is expanding, and that is not that much for refugees, but for labor immigrants, for Swedes, etc. So the conditions are different. When it comes to racism and discrimination, of course we have that. And there is one thing I forgot to say about the pictures. The picture with all these young people. Being young, a woman with a Muslim background, means that you are really harassed on the internet. So all these young girls, they get death threats, they get threats about being raped, etc., day after day. And sometimes they say, I don't take it anymore, I want to withdraw, but then they came out. So there is really, they have hard times. And the populist right wing, we have this party in the government, but on the internet, it's much worse. When it comes to discrimination in the open, I've been working a lot with housing, and of course there is discrimination, but in the housing cooperatives, the immigrants say, when I can afford to buy a flat in the cooperatives, I feel like a Norwegian, because I'm treated like anybody else. There is no discretion, it's not possible in a way to discriminate. You can go to look at the flat, and the neighbors can say, we don't want black people here, but they can't oppose it. And I think this kind of discrimination among neighbors has decreased over the years. But of course we have discrimination, but at the same time it's very much political focus on discrimination, because it's not, it should not be like that. So it's there, but I think the character is changing. For example, some years ago, some other researchers had a study about discrimination in the labor market. There was a young Pakistani with a high education asking for he was coming to interview for this job. And then the employer asked, are you coming to ask for a job for cleaning? Yeah, but that, I don't think that happened that much anymore. But we also have stories about people changing their names, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. As we see from the current situation in Estonia, which have been actually accelerating for years now, is that the polarization in the society. So I think personally, that it's quite hard to change. I would say older some person's view who is actually quite publicly racist. And doesn't have any issue with that. And it's hard to change his or her values. But what we can do is that this the segment in between of these the people we could change is exactly this local level activities. Because if you cannot fight with racism with theory or within the media. It has to be the personal context, because even if you put some good news in media, for example, we had this very very good article about in Türi some weeks ago about the story about the Syrian boy in small town in Estonia who is now fluent in Estonia and everything goes well and he makes sports and so on. But it didn't have any impact if you look at the comments or if you look at the reaction for this article. So it has to be personal. It can. I think this only even on media level, it doesn't really work if you have this polarized society already that we have here at the moment. And so I would stick to this exactly like you're advised. Also, these personal and local activities, cultural activity, sport, food, and so on. So it's and this is the practice, but we also do here, also in Tartu and Tallinn.
Okay, then Mare's question first, and then yours, Laura.
Actually, sorry for being late. I understood that topics are very, very wide and very interesting. I have one question or two. When I'm investigating the newspapers, calendars, and so on, which are published in TP camps, but also in different areas where Estonians happen to be during and before the Second World War, we can see where the interesting topics and there are kind of grassroots learning, grassroots advices, how to behave, for example, in Sweden, in England, how to behave in Canada, as you are Estonian. There are main differences between Estonian society, the society from what they started to migrate, and what happens in Sweden, how to order the documents, but also climate. Also, is it important to go to the local clergyman, how to go to the school, how to order the school, how people are looking to you. Because, for example, during the Second World War and after that, the Sweden society was quite fixed and not open to so wide. Do we have also kind of advices, kind of information for TP or for the camps, from what place the people are coming to Estonia? How to behave? What are the main national calendar feasts? How to behave if your neighbor is coming to say hello, or what to do? Because it was the grassroots and it worked really good. When I read it, I understood that it's very, very needed information about the Sweden or Canada. There are huge differences, and they are, with grassroots Estonians, they wrote from different societies how to behave, for example, in Canada, in rural area or in city area. And I think it's important to also to give kind of grassroots information. Do you do it? And next one is that I myself visited several times Scottish smaller villages or also England. They are not laughing, they are not smiling to you. They are very serious people. So I'm strongly against these stupid stereotypes. We are so cold, we are not communicative at all. We are so bad neighbors. It's actually go to France and you can see a huge parts of France. Nobody is smiling to you. All are somehow wanting that you behave like a normal society member. It was the question to Lea Kreinin, I think.
Thank you very much. I would answer the question first. So I was in Scotland 11 years, and I would disagree with you very deeply, because what me being Estonian, I experienced every time I went to to the bus stop to wait for a bus, and one old lady came and she started chatting with me, and I felt so uneasy because I didn't know what I should do, and I was just smiling to her. And I experienced everywhere I experienced people who just smiled to you, just had an eye contact with you. And I think it is very important. I agree that you don't have to smile all the time. But if I went to Rakvere and I saw a refugee family, I think they were refugees, a black family with little children, I smiled to them and they smiled back. And it was very nice because I was the only one in the bus who had an eye contact with them. And I think it is very important. But now, what is happening now, it is post-newspaper era, if you have already understood. Everything is online. Mr. Google helps you. As Juhan said very nicely that before the family with a little baby came to Estonia, they Googled Estonia and they watched YouTube videos. Also, in Estonia, there are different groups on Facebook. There are expats in Estonia and Tallinn expats and Tartu expats and all kind of groupings you can belong to, which give good advice, how to rent a flat, where to go, what to do, legal advice also. People share their experience there. And the same is also true about Estonians abroad. They have numerous groups on Facebook and they give a good advice to each other. So it all works as it worked after the Second World War. It just has gone to another level or another environment.
Kind of official information for
Official information is on a website. The Estonian Foreign Ministry gives official information on a website. I will pass it on to Juhan now. He will tell you more about it, I hope.
As I understand that actually the question is that because the Canadians and Swedes, they themselves had the information who is coming.
No. It was that Estonians informed were kind of other Estonians who it was very obvious that they must migrate again forward from Germany to Sweden, from Germany to Canada and so on. How to behave. It was grassroots information. But very, very useful information. We have also kind of state information, but we have very limited tool. We have very, very hard winter time, very, very dark times and so on.
Well, it's a good question in that sense that I think two days ago, we had one presentation here about Bulgaria and the first generation Syrians and now the second or third generation, that they don't communicate really much with each other. And in Estonia, actually, because the Arabic community is almost non-existent outside of Tallinn, and so they don't have actually really. Some years ago, they didn't have anyone to ask how it is in Estonia, But when they did have this chance to talk with this, it was rather negative effect on them. That we know that they said that they was given advice that tried not to come here. Yeah, so it is a difference with Norway or with Germany. It makes a difference if you are a destination or transit country. That. What is your motivation and all so what kind of advice you get. YouTube videos, actually, it's quite superficial, I think. I mean, the people in Greece camps, they watch YouTube videos, but it's made from the state. It's very nice, but you really don't get any deeper understanding about the country. Yes, they do say that. For example, we don't have any mosques, as you mentioned, the 40 or something in Oslo, but we don't have any mosques in Estonia. So they do say that. They mention the climate and so on. So it's quite, I would say, quite superficial information they'll get from in the camps. What can be a challenge for women here is that the eye contact is really avoided in these countries with the men, with other men. So they are already really, they are not so open to communication with the strangers. So if they come to Estonia, it needs to be other community members around that they can communicate, they can look, and so on. So this is we have seen that. We had in one family in Tartu, which they left to Lebanon back, not with resettled family, but this was the obvious problem. They said to us that the mother she couldn't communicate in Tartu in this sense, that it was too hard for her. It was around 4 years ago. So this is just one aspect also that we have to keep in mind, that the community actually empowers the newcomers also, and so it is a matter of like you said about Somalis in Norway, that actually I would support the policy that actually there we have to build secure communities that will secure each other.
Do we have actually not mosque, but the Muslims are going to the Estonian language.
Cultural center, yes. But it's not officially mosque.
Yeah, okay. But for example, we have in Tartu very interesting African church, special church created by the local students. But my next question is, what about Ukrainians and kind of hidden migration? Because we have so many migrants who are coming, I don't know how, through jobs.
Yes, we have many Ukrainians, refugees also from east part of Ukraine, but also workers. And there are agencies, companies between the Estonian employers, construction employers, and then Ukrainians, locals. So there are many more and more Ukrainians are coming, especially to work here in Estonia. As I guess also in Poland and in Lithuania, but it's increasing in Estonia also.
I just wanted to have a comment on this. I said that we are the government is trying to create small communities with people, but at the same time it's quite important to be aware that people coming from Somalia, they don't need to be friends and be on the same side. They are coming from a country of civil war. There are different clans, so they're not always on the same side. So if they are put in a small community, it could be very difficult for them.